So welcome to this week's episode of Leadership Soundbites with RokoM Michele and our super special guest, Lynn Guerin. So I'm going to read what Lynn, the titles that he has, and I'm sure there's way more than what I'm going to read you, but here we go. He's a CEO and founder of Guerin Marketing Services and also John R. Wooden Course, LLC, and author of, what was it? Coach
'em Way Up.
Coach 'em Way Up.
Coach 'em Way Up, 5 lessons for leading the John Wooden way.
Thank you very much. See, I took my glasses off and I couldn't even read the book in the back. So you're right. So I'm going to kick us off with a quote. There's a number of John Wooden quotes. And so this week's episode is on the power of being on the same page. And so in that spirit, it's around Coach Wooden's pyramid of success. Is being a role model is the most important. Let me start over. Being a role model is the most powerful form of educating. So for this one, it's so funny. Roko and I work for an organization that we called it Walk the Talk. And so it's literally about, here are the behaviors, the rules, the principles that I'm going to live by, and I'm actually role modeling and living by those. And so just everything that I've read on Coach Wooden and what he accomplished in his lifetime is nothing short of impressive. And he did just that. So I want to kick it over, Lynn, I know you knew him personally and worked with him and developed the course. And so I'd love to get your thoughts on stepping into the power of being on the same page.
Yeah, the couple of quotes that you used there speak to, I think what was more impressive than John Wooden's accomplishments was who the man was and who he was as a person. So when you begin to talk about being a role model and the example he set, that was really the way that he did the primary teaching that he did. He wrote a book called They Call Me Coach, and everybody called him Coach, but he really described himself as just a teacher. And he thought that the way he learned to teach, he primarily learned very early in his age from his father and from many of the coaches he had growing up. And his dad represented a powerful example for him growing up. And he believed that the example you set is the most powerful teaching that you can do. In the book, we actually have a 5-part process that describes how John Wooden coached. And that 5-part process starts with the quality of your thinking. But the second part of that process was the example you set. And he thought, there was another principle: values aren't caught, they're taught. Right? Or values aren't taught, they're caught, meaning they're caught by the example that you set. So everything about him, he was once described as someone whose greatness was only exceeded by his goodness. So the man he was and the example he set was primarily where most of his influence came from. And that was true when he was coaching in his 20s. And that was true when he was laying on his deathbed at 99 years old, and he was still teaching and setting an example, literally with the last words he breathed on this earth. So that was the way he lived, and that's who he was.
Yeah, it's impressive.
Yeah, I want to bring it. So when Michele shared with me that we wanted to do this, the power of one page, and she was sharing about the pyramid, I had to look it up. I wasn't familiar with it. So for those of our listeners who may not be as familiar with the pyramid or the idea of this one page, I know when I first looked at it, it sounded like a true north to me. Can you share a little bit about that?
Yeah, a couple of ideas come to mind here. One, the idea of one page to me is a powerful idea. And here's how it connects to Coach Wooden. If you think about, take your own life and your own example, think about the best idea you've ever had in your life. And I don't know if you have that idea, you've ever thought about that, you ever tried to write it down, you ever spent a lifetime trying to work on it. But think about, right? We have lots and lots of, a lot of people have a lot of ideas, you know, and we're always trying to find that big idea, right? That most important idea that we think will create the most impact for our life and hopefully the most impact for others. But I believe the Pyramid of Success was the best idea John Wooden ever had. And it was such a powerful idea that he spent 16 years working on it. He spent 2 years working on the first part of it, which was his definition of success. And you can't talk about the Pyramid of Success without talking about where it started. And it started with his defining success. Then everything came as a result of, well, if this is what I believe success is, how am I going to achieve that? And more importantly, how am I going to help others achieve it? So then he spent 14 years and lots of hours in all those years trying to put on one page a diagram that represented his blueprint for character, for competence, for human performance, for high consideration treatment. And that's what the Pyramid of Success became. So 14 years working on one page that became one diagram that you can live your life by, that you can build your company with, that you can raise a family with, that you can turn your life to and use as a sense of true north. Roko, that's a great phrase. I'd like to share, I mentioned there's actually a little poem in one of the John Wooden books. And if you haven't done any reading or any study of John Wooden, this is always the first book I recommend. I ought to be recommending my own, but it is. I'm recommending this one first, and then you can get the mine second. This one is called Wooden, A Lifetime of Observations and Reflections. So to really understand the man and his thinking and his philosophy and his faith, this is the book that you start. He speaks to almost everything that you can think about human existence. I call this the little blue book, and I've had it beside me now for 20 some years, and I never stop referring to it. And one of the things that's in this book is a poem called True North. And let me share this with you. Our ships are tossed across the night, our compass cracked for wrong or right. True north is there or over here. Confusion rules, our sea is fear. Then suddenly a beacon bright is shining through this stormy night. It's pure and straight to his true course. The coach is seen, he is true north.
See, that is so awesome. And what came to mind for me, Lynn, when you were reading that was by having true north and establishing true north, right? Whether it's leader behaviors, principles, whatever it may be, as we're going through life, you're going to have all the distractions, the storms, the everything else, the noise, if you will. But if you have that true north, that's the light that you can keep working toward and marching toward. Lacking that, you're going to end up wherever you end up.
Yeah, exactly right. You're basically, I mean, you stay with the analogy. You're basically tossed on the seas of everybody else's idea. And now we're living in a world where those ideas are coming are coming faster and more furious than they've ever had. There's more opinion, more debate, less respect for people's thinking, no real understanding of the values that are guiding people's thinking. You know, in addition to that true north, Coach had a phrase, seek wisdom. He was always thinking about a better way of thinking. And I think that's why when he developed his coaching model, he thought everything starts with the quality of your thinking.
Yeah.
Everything starts with.
I love where Michelle is going, but you know, when you were saying it,
I have different views.
Right? I could visualize these, you know, crazy gale force winds and the sea being crazy. But for me, it was the true north can also spark innovation to how to address all of these things that are coming at you. And today in healthcare, you know, there's so much disruption and there's so much change, and the pace of change is happening so quickly that by having a true north, it allows people to innovate with with that course in mind, and allows you to stay afloat, allows you to keep moving, allows you to stay relevant and to be the best today and in the future.
Yeah,
Well,
I
I
don't
mean,
know. Let me connect with this with healthcare because I'm really interested. I have some people that are working on becoming certified coaches that want to do some work in the healthcare business. It appears that that's one of the areas where there is a critical need for the idea of coaching as a leadership model. And I'll take the ideas of doctors in True North. I think if you talk to any doctor, and this was a lot of seem to suggest this, most doctors think they are True North, right? I've heard it described as a godlike complex, right? They've got life and death in their hands, and everything revolves around what they think and how they think and when they think and what they think should be done and those kinds of things. Most doctors are not very good team players. That's what I hear. And I particularly hear that from the people who work with them, like nurses and assistants and those kinds of things. Doctors are not good team players, and they're not good coaches at all. I would like to work with a doctor that's a much better coach. I want him to be a good clinician and know him, but a little bedside manner, a little coaching, a little empathy, a little understanding. He'd be a lot more effective, I think, as a person working with his patients and working with his team. I think if he had that sense of, hey, he's, Coach Wooden, you could have considered him a god of college basketball, but that was never an attitude he had for sure. So, coaching has really become I think a better idea of what leadership in this day and age is all about. And there's a lot of great leaders out there who aren't good coaches. But to be a really great coach, you've got to be a good leader. It doesn't work necessarily the other way. And I think Coach Wooden is a blueprint for how that can work, to be a great coach and a great leader at the same time, and also have the kind of empathy and understanding and bedside manner, if you will, that you would hope every one of your doctors would have.
It's interesting. I'll comment on the doctor. I'm going to say persona or perception, if you will. It's true that I think if you look at traditional docs, that there was this model because what they do triggers the care, right? Because they're writing the orders, and they're called orders. Okay. And so it's interesting how the nomenclature and the structure can contribute to there's no team, there's this clear hierarchy of what's going on. Roko and I have been in healthcare coaching within a continuous improvement model, which is aligned with leader as coach, right? To where you're a team effort, that the decisions are being made where the information is, which is where the work is happening. And so I've watched the success of leaders, and it's an interesting thing, transition, physician leaders and others, from a more traditional model where it was command and control. It's hard to do, especially if you've got decades under your belt of showing up a certain way and being rewarded for how you're showing up, to transition into something more of a coach approach. And then to answer the question for them, and that they're thinking that don't necessarily articulate out loud, is if I'm not the doer of the stuff, like if I'm not the problem solver, if I'm not, coming in and doing that, what's my role? And it goes back to what you're talking about with Coach Wooden. It's about developing capability. It's about educating. It's about doing all that. And so it's a matter of how do you successfully transition leaders to where they're getting success and acknowledgement where they got it somewhere else before, and now that transition. And so we've had success working with leaders in that. There needs to be a desire, because you can't coach anyone who doesn't want to be coached, right? But I've seen this happen, and I'm also encouraged because I've seen lean methodologies and the whole idea of continuous improvement, keep people coming together in residence and residency programs now that didn't exist before. So there's hope. Roko, your comments on what you'd like to add to that?
I just agree with everything. And the only thing that I would add is, and this was a learning that I've had over the last 12 years in being in healthcare, is that it's not just the doctor, right? Healthcare is so much more than just the doctor. Well, they are definitely performing the clinical care for the patients. The actual healing of that patient, it's like an orchestra. There's from the people who are cleaning the hospital, to the supply chain folks, to the nurses, to even the administrators who are coordinating everything. There's so many instruments, if you will, and staff that we need to develop and that are a part of this team to make that healing happen in the time frame that it needs to happen, and in an experience for the patient. So it really is this huge team environment that you're trying to, and this is where the True North really resonated with me when we were talking offline, is that there's so many teams across this continuum of care to get a patient through the healing process while they're within your four walls.
I believe in that powerfully. RokoM,
Yeah.
I have a personal example from my own life. I have a 21-year-old son who we almost lost when he was 8 years old. He contracted Stevens-Johnson syndrome. It's called the 1 in a million disease. It's deadly. You break out in what little red things that turn into blisters, and it looks like you've been burnt from head to toe.
Oh, wow.
It literally looks like you've been burnt in a fire, and it can kill you, and it does. And my son contracted that. It's an allergic reaction to medicines and things, and we thought we were going to lose him, but he was in intensive care at UCI here in Irvine, California, and I saw the best performing team I've ever seen jump in and finally get the diagnosis right, and then start to take care of him in a way that I still, to this day, almost can't talk about because it's that personal. And we saw it real world, how a team, the way they just sprung into action, and how everybody knew their role, and how they were getting the right kind of leadership and coaching, and the way they interacted, and the way they interacted with us and with him, and the skills that they had. They were a perfect team orchestrating the right solution, and it saved his life.
Wow.
Yeah, it saved his life. So it is possible.
Yes.
And it is possible that in every situation like that, you would have people who would still be telling the story 13 years later. That's the sense of possibility when it's done right, and it's done for all of the right reasons, in all the right ways, at just the right time. That's what it looks like.
It's the power of being on the same page.
And it is.
That literally, what you just described is the power of being on the same page, because I guarantee you every single person on that care team, member of that care team, they were on the same page.
Yeah.
And it's all the handouts. When I read Coach Wooden's Pyramid of Success and all the elements that are in there, you know, it's the faith and the integrity, and I think compassion, empathy. Help me out, Lynn. What else is?
Well, passion and empathy on it. It starts literally from the bottom to the.
I read that, and there's stuff.
Industriousness, enthusiasm, friendship, loyalty, cooperation, self-control, alertness, initiative, intentness, skill, confidence. Right up the top. Down one side are all the blocks that represent the human spirit, and on the other side are all the blocks of character, and those are the things, the behaviors that tie all that together. What's interesting, I've been studying John Wooden's Pyramid of Success now for 25 years. That one page is a PhD class on human performance, on human competence, and on human character. And if you look and study each individual block, let me just take one. The first block he put in place was, he called it industriousness. Right? Oh, that's not a word we even use anymore.
Not anymore.
But he developed that in the 30s when the industrial age was beginning in America, and we were building industries, right? And the idea of being industrious meant you worked hard. You just didn't work hard. You accomplished things at a higher level. That was Coach's. The reason he didn't put hard work in that block was because he didn't think it defined work at the level that it needed to be done. Industriousness is a higher form of work. He connected a very simple quote to industrious Intentness, no activity without achievement,
Exactly.
right?
There was something I
Right.
ran across
Right.
like you were
No
saying that.
activity without achievement. That's industrious. Don't do things that don't get you anywhere. You can stay busy if you want, but it's not taking you anywhere. It's just basically sucking up the valuable the valuable hours in your life.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right.
Well-intentioned versus meaningful.
Right.
Yeah, there was some quote around don't mistake
Don't
activity
mistake
for
activity for achievement. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And that ties, honestly, that ties to all of my relationship with Coach Wooden started with a very large project with the University of Toyota. We helped launch the
crazy?
University of
A lot of people,
Toyota.
yeah.
Yeah, and we were working on quality principles and all of those kinds of things that at that point, the Japanese were reinventing the American car business, and Toyota came over and basically did that based on the principles of an American who gave them those principles, but nobody in the U.S. paid attention to it. The Japanese did, and suddenly they owned the car business and the idea of how to build a quality car. I worked at General Electric for a number of years, and a fellow named Jack Welch had a principle called workout. Take out of all of our processes every task that shouldn't be done.
Yeah.
Well, Coach
I
Wooden
remember
could have
that.
saved Jack Welch $6 billion with just one phrase: no activity without achievement, Jack. Right? It was
That's
the
right.
very same principle.
So
I connected to basketball as an example. Coach Wooden never liked fancy play, right? The guy dribbling between his legs and that kind of stuff. The reason he didn't like it because it was activity without achievement.
Right.
He thought it was just showing off. The object is get the ball down the floor and put it in the basket. Don't stand there and dribble the ball between your legs. So you see how the principles apply. And interestingly, he applied it to his own life. Every minute of his life was incredibly well organized. He did not have any activity that wasn't designed to produce something positive and productive.
I'm not there. I'm not
Nope,
there.
I'm not.
I mean, I can aspire to be there, but I'm not there. Rocco, what was on your mind?
Well, when I first was looking at the pyramid, it was almost like each block was either part of competence or part of character. And so I wanted to get your thoughts on that, because I literally just finished reading Stephen Covey's book on Speed of Trust. And he talked about, the acceleration of achievement can happen when you have trust, and trust is basically competence and character, those two things put together. And so I thought, oh my God, am I just being biased because I just finished that book, or is there really something to that in this pyramid? So I'm just really curious about that.
No, we connect that trust idea, but I think we actually, and I think Coach takes it actually a little farther than even Covey did when it comes to trust. We have a powerful exercise in the John Wooden course around the idea of teachable points of view, powerful teachable points of view. If you don't have a teachable point of view on something like trust within your company, you are never going to get trust right inside your company. You can talk about how you're building trust with your company and how you're building trust with your customers, but if everybody doesn't have the same definition of what that trust means, it's never going to happen. And we actually take people through an acrostic exercise where we build a teachable point of view on trust and encourage companies and people to get that up, get it defined. As an example, we think, in working in an acrostic point of view, we think trust starts with the truth and takes time. That's the T at the front, and that's the T at the end. Takes, right? It starts with the truth, and it takes time. One of the little exercises said, if you just take that word, write the word trust down, and then I want you to write down the one person in your life that you trust more than any other. And then I want you to think through why that is. And your teachable point of view should absolutely align with that relationship you think about. Here's our view. I think trust it starts with the truth. It involves reliance, it involves understanding, it involves sacrifice, and it takes time.
And I think the time part of it, Lynn, when I hear you say that, right? Because I wrote down, a person that I feel that way with. is the time factor is that there are events that happen that build the trust, right? So that you've tested it.
Yeah.
So this event happened, I like you committed to a deadline on something and you followed through, and another deadline, you followed through. I told you something in confidence and you kept it in confidence. Again, trust. So I think it's the building of that, which is where the time factor comes in.
Yeah.
And I think you can probably shorten the time factor if you've got more touch points and opportunities that trust is tested.
Yeah, that's another tested is would be another good word.
Yeah.
But what we're demonstrating here is the value of having a
Yeah.
conversation about truly what trust is, and then a team deciding, right?
Yeah.
Because there are lots of ideas you can connect there, but what are we deciding here in our company, in our
Yeah.
family and organization? In my life, I
What-
really believe
what are we
trust is all
for?
about.
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
What are we for? And that's the whole thing about getting on the same page. You know, Coach Wooden has the you know, the character and the principles and the you know, all the behaviors and everything on one page. But to your point, the power of getting on the same page is getting the team to agree and align that this is how we're doing it.
Yeah, I think probably, and we ought to just mention this, you know, I started at the idea that his pyramid starts with his definition of success. That is so important. And the 4 elements that he defined in his definition of success and why he believed these were the elements, you know, his phrase, success is peace of mind attained only through the self-satisfaction in knowing you made the effort to become the best of which you're capable. So he had 4 key ideas: peace of mind, self-satisfaction, effort, and capability. Those were the 4 key ideas connected to what he believes true success is.
I
And-
love that, because it's not about necessarily achievement, but it's the fact that you've done all you can do and you left nothing on the table.
Well, it's also the idea he believed these were things that you actually have under your control.
Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, peace of mind, it's only going to come from you some way, shape, or form. You know, it was interesting. A couple of months ago, Adele did this major concert out in LA. Remember that? And she had this interview with Oprah Winfrey. I don't know whether
I
you
didn't
heard
see
that.
it, but yeah.
Yeah. Well, sort of the culmination of that entire interview with Oprah and Adele was around Oprah asked her, you know, this intensive looking right at her question. Adele, what is it you're looking for? What's the one thing you're really looking for? And you know what her answer was? She didn't hesitate, didn't 3-word. She said, peace of mind. Peace of mind.
Cool. That's cool.
I should have said, well, Adele, I could have given you wooden observations and reflections. It would have saved you probably a divorce. It have probably saved you millions. And here she was, right? This most famous person on the planet at that particular time. And what's she saying? She's saying, I'm looking for the first thing John Wooden told me success is all about.
Yeah.
Peace of mind.
Well, and that's the humanness of success.
Yeah.
That's the human side of it.
But most people are chasing a definition of success that they don't have any control over. That's the problem. And,
and to your point, and there was another interview I saw. It was the webinar that I was on, and it was with Flo De Benedetto, who's the general counsel for Sutter Health. And she was talking about her definition of success, and she was telling leaders, forewarning leaders, be really clear on what your definition of success is. She said, because depending on what that is, you can basically have losses in your life that you didn't necessarily count on. And she said, her definition now is not anything close to what it was when she was younger, because of, you know, she reevaluated, and there's a lot of losses associated. So that true north, whatever you're going through, or whatever you define as success, you're going to align your brain, and everything is going to align behaviors and actions toward that.
Yeah.
And so to your point, be clear on what that is, because even when you're not thinking about it, your subconscious is working on it. And so, you know, at the end of the day, what is it? Yeah. I'm looking at time. I want to be so respectful of your time, Lynn.
Yeah, I've got all day.
Good. Oh, really? So
Oh, good, because I have another question. Can I do another one? Another question, Michele?
Yeah, be like, welcome to Leadership Soundbites, Day 4.
No longer soundbite.
Okay.
Um,
Go
okay,
ahead.
so going back to the pyramid. So again, because I'm still learning it, but I just love the timelessness of it, because coming out of COVID and the burnout that occurred during COVID, and there was burnout happening prior to COVID. I think COVID just accelerated it and blew it up and all of that, right? But there was a square on there for resiliency. Can you talk more about that? What was he thinking when he put that on the pyramid? Because I can read into it based on everything that's happening now, but I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, I'd say resilience isn't a word that's isn't a block that's on the pyramid, but the concept is certainly there. Resilience is probably that same block. I think it's the intentness block. Resilience is another word also for grit, right? Angela Duckworth's book, she did an incredible job of defining resilience. She called it grit and became rich. Taking one block on Coach's Pyramid of Success, becoming a $100,000 speaker and selling millions of books around one block on the pyramid, and doing some really powerful research about why that block was so important. And she was right about that block, but that block by itself doesn't get you there, right? Mm-hmm. And that block, interesting where Coach put that block, intentness, is at the end of the second tier of the pyramid, and it connects to self-control, alertness, initiative, and then intentness. And how do those four behaviors work together? Well, you got to be in control of yourself. Mm-hmm. Everything starts with self-control, mental control, moral control, physical control. You've got to be in control. And the more, the degree to which you have greater control of yourself, your mind, your thinking, your behavior, the more alert you're going to be to the things that you should be doing and not doing in your life, right? And the better your alertness is, the more opportunity you have to take initiative on the most important things you should be doing. And the initiative then drives you to the place where you got to finish what you start, and it takes resilience and perseverance to get you there.
Love it.
That's those behavior. Coach Wooden's logic, I mean, he always taught it a block at a time, but studying it for 25 years and looking at the relationships of all of these blocks and how the tiers fit and how the mortar glues everything. It's incredible how complete his understanding of human behavior is.
Yeah.
Not just human behavior, but high performance, high competence, highly considerate human behavior.
One of Lynn, I don't know how many podcasts that Roko and I have been on, that intentionality is like her favorite word. Okay.
Well, I guess you could put that right on the intentness block.
Yeah,
right?
Yes.
So I had to laugh.
Intentionality involves both of those. Intentionality, right, is the process of getting things started and then having the will and what it takes to get them finished. It combines both of those things.
Well, and it goes back around, the ship poem and the light at the end of you have to be intentional about staying the course. Yeah. You can have a true north. You can have that light up there, but if you're not intentional about staying the course, you're going to go off course.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd like to, as part of this staying on course, I'd like to share something with you. One more little poem, if I can.
Yeah.
That was always the way Coach Wooden liked to end up whenever he, did public speaking and did camps and all those things. And he was teaching, he retired from coaching when he was 65 years old, but he taught and spoke till he was 99. I mean, as I said, I have so many stories I could share with you, but his deathbed story is one of the most powerful stories in human existence. Wow. I'm not going to share that right at the moment, but I'd like to share this little poem that was part of his idea of setting an example. And I actually have something on my desk here. This was it's the same thing that was on his desk. He actually gave me a copy of it and signed it, and I did a version of it for my own family.
What does it say on that?
A little
Well,
fellow.
it's a poem called "A Little Fellow Follows Me."
Okay.
And the picture you can see is a father with kind of a captain's hat walking down the beach, and his little son is trying to step in his dad's footsteps.
Yeah.
And so you get immediately the mental picture. And the poem goes something like this: a careful man I must be, a little fellow follows me. I do not dare to go astray, for fear he'll go the same self way. I cannot once escape his eyes. Whatever he sees me do, he tries. Like me, he says he's going to be, this little fellow who follows me. He thinks that I am good and fine, believes in every word of mine. But the base in me he must not see, this little fellow who follows me. I must remember as I go through summer sun and winter snow, I am building for the years to be, this little fellow who follows me.
I freaking love that.
Then Coach Wooden would look at his audience and he says, that's so true. And that's true for you. Be careful. Be careful.
I love it. I'm gonna look for it and print it out.
Well,
Hand it out to all the leaders.
Well, I just think because there are people that are looking to you as their role model in leadership. And so it's like, what are you telling people that you're doing, and does it align with what you're saying?
Michele goes all the way back when you guys started talking right at the beginning. You said the idea of walking the talk, and
yes,
I found this. I'm in my 70s, and I know this, that any leadership I'd like to provide, anything I wanted to do in the corporate world, that means nothing if I haven't done a decent job of just being a dad to my own boys. And the example I think I'm trying to set out in the world, and that it's so, that's so poignant for me, because I grew up in a family. My dad left when I was 3 years old, and I come to find out that his dad had left when he was 3 years old.
Oh, geez.
And his dad had left when he was 3 years old. So we didn't have any fathers taking care of the sons in our family for 120 years.
Oh, geez.
But you broke the cycle.
Well, that's the point. And that's why I'm still doing this all these years later. John Wooden became that dad, that granddad, and that great granddad I never had. But the importance of that message, just being that man, right? Whose greatness is only exceeded by his goodness, right? It's so much more important
I love
to be a
it.
good man than be a great man.
The humility was incredible that he had, and the impact that it was, Lynn,
I saw Coach Wooden with so many people. The way in which he might listen to a 7-year-old who comes up to him, or I remember one night being with him in Colorado in a snowstorm. We spoke to the cadets at the Air Force Academy, and we had a couple of thousand of them line up in line when it's 15 degrees below zero out there. And John Wooden sat there for 2.5 hours to make sure he greeted every single one of those cadets before he went home.
wow.
And then he turned to me. You'd think he would have been exhausted. He was in his early 90s. He said, wow, what a great night, Lynn. What a great night.
I love that.
And the other thing I remember him saying was, man, our country's in good hands. He said, our country's in good hands. So many great young leaders. Wow.
Lynn, thank you for sharing you and your experience with John Wooden and your passion for what he taught, and the man he was and continues to be. Through the legacy of everything else. I so appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask one thing, and this is just how we end our podcast. What is one thing that you would love people listening to walk away with?
Well, I think that one thing is that we really are the head coach of our own life. But if you're going to be a head coach, you better learn how to do it, and you might as well learn it from the best that ever did it. So make John Wooden a mentor for yourself and begin to study him, find out who he was, what he did, how he thought. If he's not your, but find somebody that can help you become the best head coach of your own life. Yeah,
I love that. Thank you. Roko.
God, how do you follow that?
I know, but I'm going to ask you to.
I know. Well, I don't have just what I have so many. I'm like, how am I going to choose? But I think it's, for me, it really is learning more about that one page, because I mean, just in this conversation that we had, there's so many powerful things that can come from it. I think the thing that the follow me, I mean, that last poem that you shared was so powerful. There's so much responsibility that comes with being a leader, and taking that to heart. And to your point, learn about it, become the best leader you can, because others are going to follow what you do. So be intentional about it.
Yeah.
Just love it. So touching. And thank you, by the way, for sharing your personal story about your son.
Yes.
That was very moving. And I'm so grateful that you shared it with us.
Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you.
Well, you can tell this is my favorite topic.
we have a passion around it too. So
Yes.
we could, and that's why I'm like, okay, this becomes a multi-day whatever.
Well, I think put in a quick plug if I could. Go to
Yes,
johnrwoodencourse.com. johnrwoodencourse.com. There's lots of one particular is if you're interested in the pyramid of success, we built an assessment around the pyramid that gives you a way to actually build your own personal pyramid of success.
in fact, do me a favor, Lynn. I'm going to get what I'll do is I'll get the link from you and I'll include it in the body so that people can have it down there too.
Okay, great.
So I'll get that from you. Yeah.
Great way to get
started. I want to take that one as well. I think for me is, I mean, it can be daunting if someone looks at that and there's so many boxes, so many building blocks, so many whatever. And I'm going to go back to my mentor, what a little bit better looks like. Pick a box, learn about it. You don't necessarily have to become a $100,000 event speaker. But learn it and basically bounce who you are up against it and where the opportunity may exist. And then once you get there, go to the next box. So it doesn't have to be the whole thing. I think
that's one more thing.
Yeah, of course, Roko.
I want a takeaway from what he said at the it was towards the middle, I think, really, not at the beginning, but defining what success is. Start with defining what success is. I thought that was, I love that.
Yeah.
Thank you. I would second that. Because when we have clarity on that, then our behavior, our
everything else,
actions, what we do is going to align to support that. So thank you again. This has been Leadership Soundbites with RokoM and Michele and our extra special guest, Lynn Guerin. Until next time, thank you.